session on SDG 1, No Poverty, the Nigerian Focus. We have with us Dr. Adesina Fagbenro-Byron, Chief Responsibility Officer, Mother Gold Limited. Dr. Byron is a management, institutional reform, and organizational development expert with a rich combination of backgrounds in economics, law, information science, consulting, as well as public and diplomatic service. He comes with over 30 years of experience across the development sphere, leading and supervising large transformational initiatives in sustainable development. Working for DFID amongst other notable organizations, Dr. Byron provided innovative skills in the design and development and the delivery of various programs. He was a regional coordinator for DFID Lagos, responsible for the management of multi-million pounds programs across Southwest states between 2010 and 2015. He was the initiator of the MDG's annual countdown in all Southwest states between 2010 and 2015, and the initiator of the Women in Governance programs in the Southwest states. Since retiring from DFID, Dr. Byron runs a consulting firm, Mother Gold Limited, consultant to the World Bank funded Saving 1 Million Lives program between 2015 and 2018. He is an expert in sustainable development goals with a focus on sub-national achievement, and is the Nigerian team leader for the SDG agenda in Africa group and a director of SDG AIA Limited UK assurance provider and supporter of policymakers in designing strategies to accelerate SDGs implementation. Let me proudly invite Dr. Adesina Fagbenro-Byron, Chief Responsibility Officer, Mother Gold, for a presentation on SDG 1, No Poverty, the Nigerian Focus. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me, Aparna, and thank you very much for all those who are listening. If I may, I would share my screen with you, and then I will go on from there. Okay. I hope my screen is very visible. Yes. So what I'm trying to do is to look at the SDG 1, no poverty, from the Nigerian perspective. I'll start with the situation analysis, which sort of describes what the conditions in poverty in Nigeria are. As many of us know, Nigeria is a nation of about 200 million people, and it has a federal structure with about 36 states, almost like the Federation of India. We have 36 states. We have a National Bureau of Statistics that collects data on poverty and works with other international agencies to do the same thing. Briefly put, as at 2020, the poverty rate in Nigeria was 40%, which are about 83 million Nigerians living under the poverty line. But this wouldn't give you a fair picture for the purposes of analysis and understanding. We have to look a bit, or disaggregate that, by the 36 semi-autonomous states in Nigeria. For instance, the state with the highest poverty in Nigeria is Sokoto State, with about 87.7%, whereas you have the lowest poverty in a state like Lagos, with just about 4.5%. About 5 states have poverty levels under 10%, most of them in the Southwest. About 10 states have poverty levels between 12 and 30%, most in the Southeast and in the Middle Belt. Most of the states that are quite poor and that affect the general Nigerian average are in the North, having between 31% poverty and 60% poverty, about 11 states. But you have at least 10 states in the North with poverty levels ranging from 61% to 88%. So you can see straight away that there are, the poverty itself in Nigeria is diverse. So the solutions have to be diverse, no matter what they are. Let me run through some of the causes of corruption, because for me, when we want to find solutions to any problem, we have to take a look at the poverty too, the causes. We have economic reasons, environmental reasons, and social reasons. And the social reasons border around governance, around corruption, around mismanagement of funds and divergence of funds. But you also have the economic reasons of lower economic growth. We have a constitutional framework in Nigeria, for example, that probably encourages the giving birth of children without putting the kind of obligation on people to actually train those children. And this is why a number of Nigerians will tell you that they need to restructure. And what the implication of this is that you'll have an economic growth rate that is rising at a rate that is far less. Nigeria is a diverse place. We have our environmental challenges, climate change, and quite a bit of other, challenges that we face. Beyond this, and it is part of the problem in trying to understand poverty in Nigeria, is the issue of deprivation. In terms of economic deprivation, having the lack of access, basically, to incomes, assets, things that can help you turn over factors of production, etc., finance. You have social deprivation, where people are excluded from socio-political activities, particularly women, and things like, you have deprivation from education. There are vast aspects and areas of Nigeria where people don't have access to education. You have cultural deprivation too, where people are constrained in the kind of positive beliefs that will develop the mindset and the mind in terms of values, in terms of promoting people to get grounded and founded in things that will put them in economic advantage. Of course, we have the political deprivation too, which is access to political power and decision-making. And this affects women seriously. And the reason why I'm putting all this is that the preponderance of these deprivations are in the northern parts of the country, where we have been able to ascertain that the poverty levels in most of the northern parts of the country are above 60, let's say above 50%. Having said that, you do have deprivation in all over the country, more, distinct either between rural areas or in the urban areas. So even in a place like the South, where you have low poverty levels, you have some extreme cases of poverty, especially amongst the urban poor, where people are living in slums, are living in areas and under conditions that are rather difficult. And what's Nigeria's response to this? If you look at Nigeria's voluntary national, sorry about that, let me go back. Nigeria's voluntary national review of the SDGs. The summary is that, look, there has to be a focus on poverty itself. But, we've discovered that, because each SDG is integrated, focus on SDG 1, on its own, might not get us to where we need to get to if we don't understand and appreciate what are the other priorities that we could use to accelerate or facilitate achievement towards SDG 1. And under the Nigerian Economic Growth and Recovery Program, Nigeria is able to define or identify at least 6 other SDGs, believing that when we pursue these SDGs, that we're likely to hit a running mark on poverty. And the first one is inclusive economy. We also have things like health and well-being, education, gender equality, peace and security, which has quite a lot to do with governance, and of course, last one being the kind of global partnerships we need to be able to draft, to pursue, a poverty reduction agenda. And the reason why, let's go back, if you go back to that slide, you'll see the first thing I highlighted is the inclusive economy. And this is where it dovetails with small, medium scale enterprises. Simply because of the fact that for you to have an inclusive economy, we believe this is a strategy against poverty. It becomes imperative since Nigeria's, national economy is one of the largest in the continent, estimated to be about 53, with labor, accounting for, taking up about 65% of labor, of the GDP, sorry. The SMEs are recognized as catalysts in establishing inclusive economic growth of any country, and a veritable instrument for macroeconomic objectives in terms of employment generation, low investment costs, development of entrepreneurial capabilities, indigenous technology, stemming rural urban migration, and the local resource utilization and poverty alleviation. In essence, what we are saying is that by building an inclusive economy for a place like Nigeria, there is a likelihood that you're going to capture your focus will eventually be the small and medium scale enterprises, which provide the greatest potential for this. The standard options before us, as we've been able to identify, is that, for SMEs, is that, look, Nigeria needs, some serious manufacturing investments anchored on export markets. And we know that a number of African countries have gone through this route to be able to build their SMEs, manufacturing that is not only for domestic consumption, but for export. We are having, the standard options, which we, as entry point for this, including things like adequate flow of credit, support for the technology, modernization, integrated infrastructure to test and, quality to facilitate quality certification for whatever products come out of SMEs, to make them accessible, to make them acceptable. Then management, modern management tools, modern management techniques and practices, enterprise development, because there's one thing for people to be skilled, to be able to do manufacturing, to get their businesses going, but that entrepreneurial skill to ensure that you can scale up, you can build up, and you can maintain whatever you have is critical. Support development as well, and of course, the welfare of artisans and workers. One of the states in Nigeria, especially Lagos State, that has the lowest levels of poverty, one of the things it did, it actually started from the lowest point. It looked at the welfare of its artisan workers and not only registered them, we migrated a number of people from the informal sector to the formal sector. Things like bricklayers, things like vulcanizer, tire repairers, roadside mechanics, and things like that. So, that was a Lagos model. We hope that this kind of thing can be spread over, the rest of Nigeria itself. But having said that, the government itself has, sort of in its own response and appreciation to the challenge, has seen and appreciated that, the SMEs have become a backbone for Nigeria's economy. 96% of Nigerian businesses are SMEs, 84% of the labor force are engaged by SMEs, and these are contributing for now to 48% of the GDP despite oil. The whole idea is that, look, if we could put some concentration on this and scale up and make more robust whatever support we are giving SMEs, the numbers will rise and get more encouraging. So through the central bank, the government of Nigeria is trying to do quite a number of things. Although the central bank itself is not funding SMEs, but the government has set up a number of agencies and institutions through which the federal bank can support. And these agencies are along the value chain of SMEs, whether from research to training, to production, to trade, or to export. So these agencies are designed to, you have research agencies, you have training agencies, you have production agencies, standardization agencies, trade agencies, and export agencies. So what happens is that the government has designed funding mechanisms in such a way the central bank now funds these facilitating agencies. And let me show you a list of some of these agencies. We have, for example, the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, which essentially facilitates exports of Nigerian goods, from all the levels. We have the Nigerian Economic Reconstruction Fund, which in itself puts in, this is part of, this is the fund that actually sort of encourage diversification. So it identifies areas that are underfunded but have the potential. Beg your pardon. You also have the Federal Institute of Industrial Research, and this is funding of research for SMEs or potential products that could be taken off by SMEs. You also have the Nigerian Industrial Bank. You have the Nigerian Standards Organization, and this is where we come in to talk about the standards and the quality of what is being produced at the SME level. The Nigerian Standards Organization is a quality promotion organization which the central bank funds and support, but deals most of the time with hardware, with production of non-consumables, things like hardware kit and stuff like that. Whereas number 6, which is the Nigerian Agency for Food, Drugs Administration Control, actually deals with things like consumables, with drugs, with food items for not only exportable, but to make sure that they meet certain standards. So it's a question of not only promoting the SMEs or supporting the SMEs to promote production, but to ensure that the quality of what they produce is right. We also have the Raw Materials Research and Development Agency, looking at raw materials, researching into it, and looking at the various options. We've discovered, for example, ancient or old products, both agric products, and understanding that new uses for old products that can go commercial. We've got things like there's a new discovery on a certain vegetable that has been discovered to help with the blood sugar level. And most of these things come out from agencies like the Raw Materials Research and Development Agencies. What they do after they do their research, they now pass it on to SMEs who are ready to take it up for commercial production, provide the necessary support for them. And of course, you have the most popular one, which we call SMEDAN, Small and Medium Scale Enterprise Agencies of Nigeria, which does a bit of everything anyway, but is a bit more hands-on, and direct with agencies. Okay. Now, but the Nigerian local chambers of commerce themselves have recently been putting pressure on the federal government and have sort of put out a shopping list for the federal government and pushed them to do certain things. And these are broad, initiatives that the chambers of commerce and industry believe speak to some of the problems, speak to some of the reasons why we have poverty in the first place. Things like expenditure in education. There's nothing we can do without proper expenditure in education, skills, and training. We still do not believe that there are enough poverty programs designed, specific programs designed that have specific timelines, specific outputs, specific indicators, and we believe that government now, and when I talk about government now, don't forget I said there are 36 state governments, apart from the federal government. There is only little much that can be done by the federal government itself because the state governments are in themselves autonomous. So whatever policies you have at the federal government, if it is not cascaded down to the state level, and if the states do not actually build on this, then we have a problem. So most of these suggestions and this pressure coming from the chambers of commerce are going to those state governments. So we also have things like enacting laws and stiffer penalty for corruption. For the purposes of, this misallocation of funds, misdirection of funds, I don't see where Nigeria can go without dealing with corruption. And so this is a very fundamental issue. And it'll only give comfort and support to those who, especially SMEs. We also want to avoid spending borrowed money. Nigeria is seriously indebted right now. Well, don't let me say seriously indebted. It sounds like a bit of an exaggeration, but we are heavily, we're heavily borrowed up, and So the whole idea is to keep a fiscal responsibility on our borrowing to make sure that it's actually directed and channeled where it will gain traction for SMEs and tilt us towards poverty alleviation more. Finally, policymakers are now being encouraged to actually form policies, whereby you encourage domestic savings, you encourage domestic investments, encourage investments and savings from the very local levels. Now, in a brief summary, what we've sort of putting in place or suggesting is that we go for a tripod of activities or a tripod of strategy. We believe that Nigeria should first re-industrialize, especially starting from the rural area. Build rural infrastructure, improving manufacturing capacity, energy capacity, agricultural capacity in the rural areas. There's still a lot of population in those rural areas. A lot of the raw materials are in those rural areas. A lot of agricultural production comes from those rural areas. So building the kind of linking rural activity with industrialization for us is key. The second thing is being said about Nigeria is that, look, Nigeria is overbanked and underfinanced. You could have a lot of banks, but take for example, we've said in Nigeria, where you have 4.7% poverty in Lagos, you have over 50% of the banks. Most of the areas where you have the banks are the areas where, you have, already, there's some overcoming of the poverty challenge. And so we're saying that, look, how do we ensure that microfinance in the rural areas, in areas like the North, microinsurance, how do we make sure that while we have banks, yes, but those banks are actually lending to the productive economy? So that is a serious area. And the third arm and the third leg really is the issue of human capacity development. For me, people are the biggest resource. Put in people and skill them and create an environment for them. But unfortunately in Nigeria now, we also have, especially in the North, we have almost 15 million children out of school. You have a high level of illiteracy. So where do you want to start from? People still have to be trained, even if it's just basic literacy, to be able to know how to read signs, read instructions. I'm not even talking about schools or high skills. But in the first place, the smallest artisan or the most basic artisan will need to know the difference between a 14 by 13 spanner and a 12 by 10 spanner. That's the basic thing they should be able to know. They should know the difference between picking up a bottle of paint and a bottle of poison. And this is where basic education and basic illiteracy has to be flooded. So for me, I would say a zero tolerance for illiteracy has to be a mantra that should be followed. And when I mean TVET, technical vocations education and training has to be a priority. So those are the tripod I think that we could actually catalyze things. I know I could be more exhaustive than this, but this pretty much sort of summarizes what the Nigerian focus is. I started by saying that, yes, we have looked at poverty. Poverty is a priority in Nigeria. But even at driving at poverty, there are other issues. There are issues of health. There are issues of education. There are issues of the environment. There are issues of governance. But the fundamental issue too is to build an inclusive economy. And in building an inclusive economy, this is where we look at the role of small and medium scale enterprises. We've been able to identify those challenges, where those challenges come from, not only the challenges of the small and medium scale enterprises, but the challenges of poverty generally. And we've tried to prefer in our own little way some solutions. Institutionally, what Nigeria is doing, we've told you the infrastructure, the the institutions that have been set up for this. And I think what is left really is the issue of political will. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Byron. That was a very, very informative presentation. As you rightly said, SMEs are the catalysts in establishing inclusive economies and can play a major part in removing poverty. And great to know about the role SME support agencies are playing to set the quality of SMEs right. And still, as you said, you have miles to go, and the human resources and capacity building is very, very important. And zero tolerance till it is to be followed. And I think these are solutions we should focus at the global level. Thank you so much, Dr. Byron, for joining us today and giving
Thank
us
you very much.
presentation.